Elara had moved to New York with a heart full of sonnets and a suitcase full of dreams. The sonnets were for Julian, the dazzling, mercurial artist she'd met in a Parisian cafe during a study abroad year. The dreams were for both of them. A loft in Soho, a life painted in bold, romantic strokes. She was a writer, he was a painter. It was supposed to be perfect. For 2 years, Elara played muse and supporter. She waitressed at a trendy bistro in the West Village, her feet aching, but her spirit buoyed by the belief that she was fueling genius. Julian's art was intense and beautiful, much like the man himself, but it was as saleable as a snowball in hell. He was perpetually on the verge of a breakthrough, a phrase Elara heard so often it lost all meaning. Her paychecks paid for the rent on their cramped, railroad-style apartment in Bushwick, for the canvases, the high-quality paints, the takeout when Julian was in the flow. Her love was a one-way street paved with her own compromises. She'd cancel plans with new friends when Julian was feeling insecure. She'd spend her meager savings on a vintage typewriter he admired, only for him to barely notice. Her own writing was confined to the Notes app on her phone during her subway commute. Each disappointment was a small, sharp stone she pocketed, too in love to feel its weight. The great unraveling began, as it often does, with something small. It was a Tuesday. Elara had been given a generous tip by a sympathetic regular, a $100 bill she'd decided to spend on a beautiful cut of steak and a bottle of good red wine. A celebration for no reason other than it was a Tuesday. She came home to find the apartment smelling of turpentine and a strange floral perfume. Julian was on the phone, his voice a low, intimate murmur she hadn't heard directed at her in months. He quickly hung up, his charm instantly activated. "Elara, you're home early." He kissed her cheek, his eyes avoiding hers. Later, as she seared the steak, a text flashed on his phone, left face up on the table. "Can't wait for Friday. The gallery owner is a huge fan of your new work. And of you. XO. Isabel." Isabel. The wealthy gallerist who had been discovering Julian for the past 6 months. Elara felt the stones in her pocket turn to lead. The confrontation was messy, full of tears and denials that slowly crumbled into admissions. Julian wasn't sorry he'd been caught. He was sorry she was making a scene. "She understands the art world, Elara," he said, his voice cold. "She can actually help my career." That was the final, definitive stone. The weight of it broke her. She didn't scream or throw things. She simply went quiet. She packed a single suitcase, leaving behind the vintage typewriter, the sonnets, and the ghost of the woman she'd been. She spent that night on the couch of a coworker, crying tears that felt less like sadness and more like a toxic cleanse. Homeless, heartbroken, and nearly penniless, Elara found a room in a shared apartment in Washington Heights, a far cry from her romanticized New York. The city, once a backdrop for her love story, now felt like a brutal, indifferent machine. She quit the bistro, unable to bear the memories it held, and took a data entry job at a sprawling, soul-crushing insurance firm. It was numbingly boring, but it was stable. The only thing she had left was her mind, and she was determined to use it for herself. Her job involved processing thousands of claims, a monotonous stream of human misfortune. But Elara, the writer, started to see patterns where others saw data. She noticed the specific recurring loopholes that led to claim denials, the inefficiencies in the workflow that cost the company millions, and more importantly, she saw a gap in the market. A way to use technology not to deny claims, but to streamline the process for smaller, underserved businesses, making it more humane and efficient. At night, instead of pining for Julian, she taught herself to code. She devoured books on business and finance. The energy she had once poured into a man, she now channeled into an idea. It was her child, her passion. She drafted a business plan on a second-hand laptop, her writer's gift giving her pitch a clarity and vision that was compelling. It took 3 years of grueling work, of maxed-out credit cards and meals of instant ramen. She found a mentor, a no-nonsense female investor who saw the fire in her eyes, a fire born of being underestimated. She secured seed funding. Her company, Clarity Claim, started small but quickly gained a reputation for its elegant software and ethical approach. The day her company secured its Series B funding, valuing it at over $50 million, was a quiet Tuesday. There was no dramatic phone call, no fanfare. She was in her minimalist office in Flatiron, looking out at the iconic New York skyline. The city that had taken so much from her had given her something better in return: herself. On a whim, months later, already a millionaire many times over, she decided to visit a high-profile auction. It was a world she now had access to, but had never bothered to explore. And there he was, Julian. He was trying to look prosperous, but his jacket was slightly too shiny, his confidence frayed at the edges. He was fawning over Isabel, the gallerist, who seemed bored. Their eyes met across the room. A flicker of shock passed over his face, followed by a calculated, familiar smile. He excused himself and made his way over. "Elara," he breathed, his voice dripping with false nostalgia. "My God, you look incredible." "Hello, Julian," she said, her voice calm, devoid of the old longing. "I heard rumors," he said, gesturing vaguely at the opulent room, "that you'd done well for yourself. I always knew you were special." He launched into his old spiel about being on the verge of a new collection, about how your pragmatic mind would complement his artistic soul. He was essentially pitching her, looking for a new patron. The symmetry was almost poetic. She listened politely, then smiled a small, genuine smile. It held no malice, only pity. "Julian," she interrupted softly, "I'm not an investor in broken dreams anymore. I specialize in viable ventures. I hope you find what you're looking for." She turned away, not toward anyone, but simply toward the rest of her life. She didn't look back. The misfortune in love woman was gone. In her place was Elara, who had learned the hardest and most valuable lesson of all: the greatest fortune you can ever find is the one you build yourself.